let us discuss a fundamental aspect of our democracy, the Constitution of India, and how it carefully guides and shapes the functioning of the three pillars of governance. The three pillars are the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. These three branches, they form the very backbone of our political system, each with its own unique responsibilities, yet all working together to ensure a balanced, fair, and just governance for the people of our nation. The Constitution of India, drafted by Baba Saheb Ambedkar and his colleagues, it is the supreme law of the land. It lays down the framework within which our democracy operates. It establishes the rule of law, protects fundamental rights, and defines the powers and functions of the different branches of government. However, for most people, the intricacies of these branches and their interrelationships, they may seem distant and complex. Today, let's break down these concepts in a simple and accessible way so that every one of us can understand the importance and how they directly impact our lives. India is the largest democracy in the world, and its strength it lies in how power wisely divided between these three branches. Each one has a special role. Each one is like a pillar holding up the building of our democracy. First, we have the branch called legislation, the powerful voice of the people. It is made up of leaders elected by us. They make laws, they discuss policies, and ensure that public hopes and the concerns are turned into real action. Through the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, the legislature keeps the spirit of democracy alive, making sure that India is run not by a few, but by the will of the common people. Secondly, we have the executive body, executive branch. This branch that takes laws and turns them into action. Led by the president, led by the prime minister and the council of ministers, and supported by hard-working civil servants. The executive wing is the force that runs our daily governance. It builds schools, universities, it maintains law and order, it delivers welfare schemes, and ensures that the country keeps moving forward. They turn dreams written on papers into realities on the ground level. And thirdly, we have equally important, we have the judiciary. The fearless guardian of our constitution, this is judiciary. It protects our rights, it interprets laws, it resolves dispute, it ensures that no one, not even the most powerful, is above the law. From the smallest village dispute to the biggest national issue, the judiciary stands firm for fairness, truth, and justice. But why do we have this separation? Why is it so important that these branches stay independent? It is simple. Power must not be concentrated in any one hand. The great thinker Montesquieu, he once said that democracy survives only when powers are divided. If all power is held by one person or in one group, freedom dies. That is why in India, the constitution makes sure that each branch works in its own field without interfering too much with the others. It ensures checks and it ensures balances so that every action is lawful, every decision is accountable, and every citizen's liberty is protected. The Constitution of India, it is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It guides the nation's legal and political framework. However, the interpretation of the Constitution is in the hands of the judiciary, particularly in the hands of Supreme Court. Supreme Court has led to debates about the relative powers of the judiciary and the parliament. The question of whether the judiciary holds more power than the parliament or vice versa, it has been topic of considerable discussion in Indian politics. This debate has gained significant attention in recent days, especially after the Vice President's remarks. His remarks on the Supreme Court using Article number 142 is like a nuclear bomb. To understand the core of this debate, one must first look at the role of the Constitution and its framers. The framers of the Indian Constitution, they envisioned a system where powers were distributed across three branches of government. Okay, the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. These were the three we discussed. This separation, it was meant to prevent the concentration of power in one entity, which was a common feature of monarchies and dictatorial regimes. In this context, it is crucial to examine what the framers intended when they created the Constitution and what the text of the Constitution actually says. The current debates and issues, they stem from the ways in which the judiciary interprets and applies the Constitution, which in some cases it seems to challenge the actions and decisions of the Parliament. A recent example that has reignited this discussion is the role of the Supreme Court in interpreting laws passed by Parliament. The Parliament, after extensive debates and deliberations, they pass laws which then receive assent from the President and become acts. However, the Supreme Court can question these laws, and there have been instances where the court has declared certain laws unconstitutional even after they have been passed by the elected representatives of the people. This raises the question of whether the judiciary is overstepping its bounds and exercising power that should be reserved for the legislature. The issue becomes even more complex when we consider cases like the Waqf Act, recent Waqf Act on the powers of the governors under Article 200, where the interpretation of the law by the judiciary has been challenged. For instance, in cases concerning the powers of the governors, there is a provision in the Constitution that allows governors to withhold assent to a bill passed by a state legislature if they feel it contradicts central laws or raises national concerns. In such cases, the governor can reserve the bill for the president's consideration. However, recent Supreme Court judgments, they have sought to impose a timeline on the president to decide on these bills within 3 months. A decision that has led to criticism from political leaders. They argue that this sets a precedent where even the president, the head of the state, a president is bound by the timeline imposed by the judiciary. This raises important questions about the balance of power between the three branches of government. Another area of concern that Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar, he raised a question of corruption investigations and judicial independence. The Lokpal, a body created to investigate corruption, it has been criticized for not being able to investigate High Court judges, even in cases where there are allegations of corruption. The argument is that if the Lokpal is meant to investigate corruption, then why should it be restricted from investigating judges? The judiciary has refused to allow such investigations, raising concerns about judicial accountability. This issue, it highlights the challenges in ensuring that no section of the government, including the judiciary, is above scrutiny. Furthermore, the process of appointing judges. The process of appointing judges. It has also been a point of contention. While judges of the lower judiciary, they are selected through exams based on merit, judges for the higher courts, including the Supreme Court, they are appointed through the collegium system, which is a group of senior judges. The collegium system, it was not originally outlined in the Constitution, but it was established through judicial interpretation in the second and third judges' cases. This system has raised questions about transparency, especially when there have been allegations of nepotism and lack of diversity in the judiciary. The introduction of the National Judiciary Appointments Commission, NJAC. It was an attempt to bring more transparency to the process. But the Supreme Court struck it down, asserting that the judiciary should retain control over judicial appointments. The debate over judicial independence and accountability is rooted in the broader question of the separation of powers. The Constitution was designed with a clear division of labor. The legislature makes laws, the executive implements them, and the judiciary resolves disputes and ensures justice. As the role of the judiciary has expanded, it has increasingly found itself involved in areas traditionally reserved for the other branches. The Vice President's warnings about the judiciary stepping into the domain of executive governance reflects this concern. The judiciary has asserted its right to interpret the Constitution and laws, often striking down legislation passed by Parliament. This has led to a situation where the judiciary is seen as exercising executive power, a development that goes against the principle of separation of powers. This conflict between the judiciary and parliament is not a new phenomenon. It began soon after the Constitution came into force in 1950. In fact, as early as 1951, debates about the scope of judicial powers were underway. A landmark case in this context was the Chempakam Dorairajan case, where a student challenged caste-based reservations in admissions to medical schools. The case raised important questions. It raised important questions about whether the reservation system violated the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution, particularly Article number 15, which prohibits discrimination on the grounds of caste. At the time, the Supreme Court was reluctant to challenge laws passed by the Parliament, partly because the same leaders who had drafted the constitutions were in power. So the court was hesitant. The court was hesitant to overrule the Parliament, which had significant legitimacy in the eyes of the public. However, as time went on, the court began to assert its power more forcefully, particularly in the 1960s, with the Golaknar case, where it ruled that fundamental rights were sacrosanct and could not be amended by Parliament. This marked the beginning of a tug of war between the judiciary and the Parliament over the interpretation and amendment of the Constitution. In the Golaknar case, The Supreme Court asserted its right to protect fundamental rights from being amended by Parliament. This decision was a direct challenge to the power of Parliament, which had previously used Article 368 to amend the Constitution. The court's judgment in this case, it laid the groundwork for the basic structure doctrine, which emerged in the Keshavananda Bharati case in 1973. The basic structure doctrine, it holds that certain fundamental principles of the Constitution, they cannot be altered. They cannot be altered even by the Parliament. This doctrine was a judicial innovation, as it is not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, but it has since become a cornerstone of Indian constitutional law. The basic structure doctrine, it was tested again during the era of Indira Gandhi, when she introduced several constitutional amendments to limit the power of the judiciary. These amendments sought to prevent the judiciary from interfering with the decisions of Parliament, particularly in cases involving the fundamental rights of citizens. The Supreme Court, however, they upheld its authority to review constitutional amendments and continue to assert the fundamental rights were beyond the reach of Parliament's power to amend. This was seen most clearly in the Keshavananda Bharati case, where the court ruled that the basic structure of the Constitution, it could not be altered by Parliament. The tension between Parliament and judiciary, it continues to this day, even in 2025 April. While Parliament has the power to amend the Constitution under Article 368, the judiciary has the final say on the interpretation of the Constitution. This has created a situation where both branches of the government, they exercise significant power, but often in ways that are in tension with one another. The judiciary's role in protecting the Constitution's fundamental principles, particularly the basic structure doctrine, it has made it a key player in shaping the direction of Indian constitutional law. Our constitution through articles like 50, 122, 245 and many others, our constitution carefully draws the line between these branches. Great judgments like Keshavananda Bharati case and S.R. Bommai case, they have protected this separation and preserved the basic structure of our democracy. This system is not just an idea written in books. It is the beating heart of India's freedom. It is a silent promise made to every citizen that no one is too small to have rights and no one is too big to escape their responsibility. Now, let us look at three simple examples that clearly show why the legislature, executive and judiciary, they are very important in the life of a common citizen. These examples will help us understand how each wing they play a special role in protecting the rights, improving the lives and ensuring justice for the people. There was once a small farmer living in a remote village. For example, for many years, this person struggled to earn a good income from hard work in the fields because the prices for crops, they were very low. However, things began to change when the Parliament of India passed a new law ensuring a paid minimum support price for farmers. We are assuming because of this law, the government machinery sprang into action. Procurement centers, they were set up near the villages and officers were sent to directly purchase crops at a guaranteed price. They made sure that middlemen did not exploit farmers. Finally, farmers like him began receiving rightful payments for their produce. There were some who tried to break the rules and cheat the farmers. Determined to protect, that farmers' rights, this person approached the court. The judiciary acted swiftly and ordered the authorities to strictly enforce the law and punish those who violated it. As a result, the farmer was able to uplift his family's standard of living, send the children to school, and expand farming activities. This experience shows us how when three wings of the government work together, even a simple citizen can live with dignity and hope. In another town, if we take one more example, a concerned citizen was troubled by the poor condition of the roads in that particular area, that particular town. The local authorities, they had delayed repairing the roads for many years, causing inconvenience to the people. Then this person, aware of his rights, he decided to take action. Thanks to a powerful law passed by the legislature, the Right to Information Act, RTI, he had the legal right to demand details about the project. An application was filed asking why the roads repaired, they were not completed. This put pressure on the government officers who were forced to reveal hidden files and expose the negligence. When some officers tried to hide the truth and delay the action, the citizen turned to judiciary. The court stood firmly by his side, ordering full transparency. The court ordered full transparency and warning the officials against any misuse of power. Because of his efforts and the support of the law, the Star Road project was restarted and completed, bringing relief to the entire town. This story proves how a determined individual, a common person, supported by the three wings of government, he can become a force for positive change. In another situation, a shopkeeper was peacefully participating in a protest demanding better civic amenities in his town. This is also an example. Unfortunately, during the protest, he was wrongly arrested by local police. He knew that the constitution made by the lawmakers of India, the constitution gave him the right to freedom of speech and peaceful protest. Although initially wronged by the executive in the form of police action, higher officers, they quickly realized the mistake and released him. Still, this person decided to approach the judiciary to ensure that such incidents would not happen to others in the future. The court heard the case carefully and ruled that the arrest was illegal, and the court ordered compensation for the injustice suffered. This experience is a powerful reminder that even when mistakes happen, the system of legislature, executive, and judiciary, they can correct itself and protect the dignity of every citizen. Then the legislature, executive, and judiciary in India, they are like three pillars. They are like three pillars holding up the great building of democracy. Though they have separate responsibilities, they are deeply connected and they work closely with each other to make sure that the country runs smoothly, fairly, and efficiently. Let us understand their interrelationship in a simple way. First, when it comes to lawmaking and when it comes to execution, the legislature makes the laws and the executive puts those laws into action. For example, when the parliament passed the goods and services tax like GST, it was the executive who made sure that GST was implemented all across the country. They set up systems, they set up trained officers, and they create the structure to collect the new tax, showing how one wing depends on the others to serve the people. Next, we see how the judiciary can guide the legislation. Sometimes the judiciary identifies problem in a society and gives important directions, which later become formal laws. A good example of this is the Vishaka guidelines. It given by the Supreme Court in 1997 to protect women from harassment at the workplace. These guidelines later shaped a full law. The Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act 2013. This shows how the judiciary, though mainly a protector of rights, it can also inspire better laws. During emergencies, all these three branches, they must work together to protect the nation. For example, if we take during the COVID-19 pandemic, the executive took steps like lockdowns to control the spread of the virus based on powers given by the laws passed earlier by the legislature. Meanwhile, the judiciary kept an eye to make sure that people's constitutional rights were not unfairly violated. This teamwork saved countless lives and maintained the balance between public safety and individual freedom. Now, even though these branches are separate, sometimes their powers overlap. For example, the legislature has powers that touch upon the judiciary. Parliament can remove judges of the Supreme Court or High Courts through a process called impeachment. If they are found guilty of serious wrongdoing, they have the power. If they are found guilty of serious wrongdoing. Also, if a law passed by Parliament is declared unconstitutional by the judiciary, Parliament can try to amend the law to bring in line with the Constitution. In addition, the legislature can punish individuals for disrespecting Parliament, something that feels similar to what courts do when they punish for contempt. The legislature, it also has the strong links with the executive. The Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, they are not outsiders. They are elected members of the legislative itself. This means that the executive is born for the legislature. If the legislature feels the executive is not doing its job well, it can pass a no confidence motion and force the government to resign. Even the president can be impeached by the parliament if found violating the constitution. Similarly, the executive's powers sometimes overlap with the judiciary and legislature. The president, who is part of the executive, the president appoints the judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts. Although the judiciary recommends names, the final appointment is made by the executive. Moreover, the president and governors, they have the power to grant pardons to individuals. They can grant pardons to individuals which can directly affect the judgments given by the courts. The executive also creates many tribunals and bodies that carry out judicial functions, helping the common people to get faster justice in special matters. When it comes to the legislature, the executive has certain powers. In urgent situations, when parliament is not in session, the president can issue ordinances which have the same power as law. Through delegated legislation, parliament can allow the executive to create rules and regulations for better and faster administration. For example, under the Food Safety and Standards Act, the FSSAI, it was given authority to set detailed food safety rules. Finally, the judiciary also has the powers that sometimes steps into the executive and legislature areas. Under Article 142, the Supreme Court can take any necessary action to deliver complete justice, even it feels like performing executive duty. The courts also perform judicial review. They check whether government actions are new laws, they match the constitution or not. If not, the courts can cancel it. The judiciary protects the basic structure of the constitution as declared in the famous Keshavananda Bharati case, meaning parliament cannot pass any law that destroys the core values of the constitution. Thus, even though the legislature, executive and judiciary, they have different jobs, even though they have different jobs, they are beautifully linked like threads in a single family. They work independently but also depend on each other. They always balance power, protecting the people and ensuring that democracy remains alive. Democracy remains strong and democracy remains vibrant. The doctrine of separation of powers. It is a crucial feature of India's political system, though it is not applied in its strictest form as seen in some other countries. According to the Constitution of India, the executive, legislative and judicial, these powers are divided among three distinct branches, each with its own responsibilities. The executive power is vested in the president, while the legislative power belongs to parliament, and the judiciary holds the power to interpret the laws through the courts, which include the Supreme Court, High Courts and lower courts. Each branch plays a vital role in ensuring the smooth functioning of the country, but they must also work within the limits set by the Constitution. In India, the executive has the responsibility to implement the laws passed by the legislature, and its powers are clearly outlined in the Constitution. The legislative branch or the parliament. It is empowered to make laws and can amend them when necessary, but it cannot override or disregard the judgments of the judiciary. For example, Parliament cannot declare a judgment made by a court void, highlighting the importance of judicial independence. Similarly, the judiciary is independent and it can review the laws passed by Parliament, as we discussed earlier, because it ensures they are in line with the Constitution. If any law is found to violate the Constitution, the judiciary has the authority to declare it unconstitutional. This checks and balances the system and ensures that no single branch has unchecked power, safeguarding the democratic framework of the nation. While the Constitution establishes a framework for the separation of powers, it does not enforce a rigid separation. As pointed out by Justice Mukherjee in the case of Ram Jalaya versus State of Punjab, the Indian Constitution does not strictly follow the doctrine of separation of powers, but instead follows a separation of function. This means that while each branch has its design roles, there is some overlapping function. For instance, the executive and legislature work closely together. They work closely together with cabinet ministers playing roles in both areas. Additionally, the president, as the head of the executive, the president is bound by the advice of the Council of Ministers, which is a legislative body, showcasing the interconnectedness between these branches. Then one of the key aspects of separation of powers in India is that the judiciary maintains independence, which is essential for protecting citizens' rights and ensuring justice. The judiciary has the power to conduct judicial review, which allows it to scrutinize laws and governmental actions. It ensures they comply with the constitution. For example, as we discussed earlier in the Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala case, the Supreme Court ruled that Parliament cannot alter the basic structure of the Constitution. They don't have any right to alter the basic structure of the Constitution, which includes the separation of powers. This ruling cemented the idea that no branch can overstep its authority and take over the functions of another branch. Moreover, the concept of separation of powers is central to the concept of checks and balances, where each branch it monitors and limits the actions of the others. This prevents any single branch from gaining excessive powers. The Constitution, though not explicitly declaring the separation of powers in absolute terms, it has established this principle as an essential feature of India's governance. This was reinforced in the Indira Gandhi versus Rajnaran case, where the Supreme Court held that the legislature could not perform judicial functions, such as deciding election disputes, as it violated the separation of powers doctrine. The separation of powers in India is not a rigid framework, but a principle that ensures the distribution of power among the three branches to prevent anyone from becoming too powerful. This distribution of functions and powers, it is essential to maintain democracy and the rule of law, making it harder for any group to abuse the power. The judiciary, the legislature, and the executive, they must work together. But within the defined rules, ensuring that the democratic system functions smoothly and effectively. To understand the complexities of judicial independence and its relationship with the legislature and executive, we must delve into a few examples that highlight the challenges and nuances of the system. These examples, they will shed light on the delicate balance between the judiciary's role in upholding constitutional values and the potential for political influence in the appointment and functioning of judges. So, let's start this by exploring how bureaucratic delays and political interference, they can impact the judicial process. When suggestions are submitted to the Ministry of Law and Justice, there is often no clear timeline for how long the file will sit there. This lack of set timeline, it is a significant problem. The file could be delayed indefinitely without any explanation, leading to uncertainty in the system. To illustrate this issue, let me present a hypothetical example, and I emphasize that this is purely hypothetical with no connection to any real life situation. If you draw any parallels to actual events, that's a purely coincidental. Imagine a state where the CM is facing opposition from several MLAs of his party. These MLAs might switch their allegiance to another party. It causes the CM to lose his majority in the legislative assembly, which is a critical factor for the CM to remain in power. Okay? In this scenario, the governor of the state who happens to represent the opposition party at the national level, he bypasses. We assume that he bypasses the traditional process of calling for a protest, which is the standard procedure to check the majority in the assembly. Instead, the governor sends a report directly to the president. He claims that the CM has lost his majority and he suggested that the government be dismissed with the president's rule being imposed. Following this, the president, acting on the advice of the prime minister and council of other ministers, he agrees to impose president's rule. However, the CM, he dissatisfied with this action, he decides to take the matter to the High Court or even the Supreme Court. Now, in this hypothetical case, let's assume the High Court of the state reviews the situation. The judge, shackled by the apparent misuse of president's rule, he expresses concern about the lack of a protest or any formal evidence of political instability. This is where the case takes an interesting turn. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, he had said that president's rule should be invoked only in extreme cases where there is total political breakdown. It should never be used as a routine measure to settle political disputes. Here in this case, the hypothetical case, president's rule was imposed without any solid evidence. So, the judge declares that the imposition of president's rule was based on questionable motives and he orders its revocation. This brings attention to the power of the judiciary to review even the decisions of the president and the council of ministers, especially when the decision is seen as being unconstitutional. So, eventually, elections are held and the political process continues. Now, the judge who made this decision, being close to retirement age, he faces an uncertain future. High Court judges, they retire at 62, while Supreme Court judges, they retire at 65. The judiciary, through the collegial system, it recommends this judge for the elevation to the Supreme Court. However, when the recommendation reaches the Ministry of Law and Justice, it languishes there for an indefinite period. Why? Because there is no specific timeline for how long the ministry can hold on to the file before sending it to the president for final approval. In a situation like this, if the judge retires before the file is processed, he may miss out on the opportunity to be appointed to the Supreme Court. Although the ministry can return the file to the Collegium once, the Collegium can reaffirm its recommendation and then the ministry must forward it to the president. However, since there is no fixed timeline, the file can get stuck in bureaucratic delays. In this case, imagine the media gets hold of the story and raises concern. They claim that the delay in processing the judge's file is an attack on judicial independence. The media questions why the ministry is holding up the file when the judge made a decision that went against the misuse of president's rule. Under public pressure, the ministry eventually forwards the file to the president, who signs it, and the judge is appointed to the Supreme Court. While this scenario may seem to have a happy ending, it highlights the vulnerability of judicial appointments to political interference and administrative delays. This situation brings us to a broader issue of judicial independence and the powers of the judiciary to ensure its freedom from external pressures. One way the judiciary maintains its independence is through its power to punish for contempt of court. The Supreme Court and High Courts, they are courts of record. It means their decisions serve as precedents for other courts. They also have the power to punish both civil and criminal contempt. Civil contempt, it involves disobeying a court order, while criminal contempt, it includes actions that defame or scandalize the court, thereby undermining public confidence in the judiciary. This power of contempt ensures that the judiciary remains free from external interference, allowing judges to make decisions without fear of political or social repercussions. Judges, they also enjoy a security of tenure, meaning they cannot be removed arbitrarily. Their salaries and their pensions, they are drawn from the Consolidated Fund of India, which means that Parliament cannot cut their pay without a valid reason. This provides financial security and allows judges to focus on delivering fair and just decisions without worrying about external pressures. The system of judicial appointments, it has been the subject of much debate. Judges are appointed through the collegiate system, a process that was developed by the judiciary itself in the 1990s. The collegium, it consists of the Chief Justice of India and 4 senior Supreme Court judges, and it recommends the appointment of judges to the higher courts. However, the government proposed the creation of the National Judicial Appointments Commission, NJAC, which would include members of the executive in an attempt to make the process more transparent. But the judiciary resisted. The judiciary resisted this change, arguing that the NJAC, it would compromise judicial independence. The Supreme Court, in the 4th judge's case, declared the NJAC unconstitutional, reaffirming the judiciary's exclusive role in appointing judges. This decision further emphasizes the importance of maintaining the independence of the judiciary in India. At times, the judiciary has been accused of judicial overreach, particularly when it intervenes in matters traditionally handled by the executive or legislature. Critics argue that the judiciary oversteps its bounds by making decisions that should be left to elected representatives. However, the counter argument is that the judiciary steps in only when the legislature or executive, they fail to act in a manner that violates constitutional principles. Judicial activism, it occurs when citizens approach the courts because the government has failed to address issues that affect their fundamental rights. For example, in the case of workplace sexual harassment, the judiciary intervened because there was no adequate legal remedy. The Supreme Court took steps. The Supreme Court took steps to protect women's rights and ensure that employees, they were held accountable for providing a safe working environment. Similarly, in case of political instability or abuse of power, the judiciary has stepped in to maintain the rule of law and ensure justice. The judiciary also plays an important role in protecting individual rights, as seen in the Bijo Emanuel case. As in this case, the Supreme Court ruled that students who choose not to sing the national anthem in school due to religious beliefs, it could not be punished. The court upheld their right to remain silent, citing the constitutional protection of religious freedom. Another important issue is the anti-defection law, which was introduced to prevent elected representatives from switching parties and undermining the democratic process. However, the law is often undermined when speakers of the legislative bodies they delay making decisions on defections. It allows politicians to manipulate the system for their benefit. In such cases, the judiciary can step in and order action to prevent misuse of. The judiciary also has the power to address the issues related to succession and property right. In the case of the Hindu Succession Act, the Supreme Court ruled that daughters have equal rights. Daughters have equal rights to family property, a landmark decision that helped advance gender equality in India. While the judiciary has significant powers, the ultimate power it rests with the parliament, especially in matters of impeachment. If a judge is found guilty of misconduct or incapacity, parliament can initiate the process of removal. Additionally, parliament controls the appointment of judges and they can amend the laws passed by the courts, as seen in the Shahbano case, which is very controversial in those days. It overruled a Supreme Court decision by amending the law. The debate between judicial supremacy and parliamentary supremacy is complex. While the judiciary plays a critical role in upholding the constitution and ensuring justice, Parliament holds significant power. Parliament holds significant power, especially in matters related to the constitution and the removal of judges. Ultimately, both branches they must work within the framework of the constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. In conclusion, the Constitution of India it stands as the guiding document that ensures the proper functioning of our democracy by establishing a clear framework for the legislature and for the executive and for the judiciary. Each branch has its distinct responsibility, but they are designed to work together in harmony because to create a system of checks and balances that prevents any one branch from becoming too forward. This delicate balance is what ensures justice, fairness, and accountability in our governance. It is important for each of us to understand how these three branches they operate and how they affect our daily lives. The laws made by the legislature are implemented by the executive and interpreted by the judiciary. These they can shape the very foundation of our society.